In the bustling city of Chicago, in a modest family restaurant called The Taste of Home, a young black waitress named Jasmine Thompson worked. At 25 years of age, Jasmine was known for her warm smile and her tireless willingness to serve customers to the best of her ability. Every day, she arrived at work at 6 in the morning, tied on her immaculate white apron, and prepared for another day of dedicated service. Among the restaurant's regular customers was an elderly gentleman named Harold McAllister. At 87 years old, Harold was a man with a fragile appearance, but with a resilient spirit that captivated everyone around him. He was a veteran of World War II and had lost the mobility of his legs during the conflict. Since then, Harold has moved around in a wheelchair, but that never stopped him from maintaining his daily routine of visiting the restaurant for breakfast. Harold always arrived promptly at 7:30 in the morning, pushing his wheelchair with determination. Jasmine watched him through the restaurant window, admiring his perseverance. As soon as he entered, she was ready to welcome him with a warm smile and a, "Good morning, Mr. McAllister, same as always." Over the years, Jasmine and Harold developed a special friendship. She not only served his meals but also took time to talk to him, listen to his war stories, and share a little of her own life. Harold, in turn, saw in Jasmine not just an attentive waitress, but a young woman full of potential and dreams. Every day, Harold ordered the same breakfast: scrambled eggs, buttered toast, crispy bacon, and a tall glass of fresh orange juice. Jasmine always took care of his order, making sure the eggs were exactly the way he liked them, soft and creamy. She was also careful to cut the toast into small squares, making it easier for Harold to pick it up with his shaking hands. As time passed, Jasmine began to notice small changes in Harold. Sometimes he would forget what he ordered or mix up the days of the week. She noticed that his memory was beginning to fail, but she always treated him with dignity and respect, never making him feel diminished by her occasional lapses. On a particularly busy day, Harold arrived at the restaurant looking more tired than usual. Jasmine, even with a line of customers waiting to be served, made a point of dedicating extra time to him. She adjusted his wheelchair to a more comfortable position, brought an extra cushion to support his back, and even offered him a light blanket for his knees, since the air conditioning was a bit strong that day. This gesture of kindness did not go unnoticed by other customers. Many commented on Jasmine's dedication, and some even left extra tips in recognition of her compassion. However, for Jasmine, caring for Harold was not a burden or an obligation, but rather a privilege. She saw in him the figure of the grandfather she never had, and every moment she spent with him was an opportunity to learn from his wisdom and life experience. As the months passed, Harold's health began to noticeably deteriorate. He began arriving at the restaurant later, often accompanied by a caregiver. Jasmine noticed that his hands were shaking more when holding the cutlery, and that he had difficulty articulating some words. Still, she never lost her temper or showed frustration. On the contrary, she adapted her care to Harold's new needs, often cutting his food into smaller pieces or helping him hold his glass of juice. On a rainy autumn day, Harold arrived at the restaurant with a different expression on his face. His normally tired eyes shone with a special light. He asked Jasmine to sit with him for a moment, something she did occasionally when the restaurant's traffic allowed. Harold then took out an envelope from his coat pocket and handed it to Jasmine with shaking hands. "Jasmine," he said, his voice breaking, "you have been more than a waitress to me. You have been a friend, a confidant, and in many ways, the granddaughter I never had. Your kindness and dedication throughout these years have meant more to me than you can imagine." Jasmine, moved by Harold's words, held the envelope without knowing what to expect. She looked at it, waiting for permission to open it. With a slight nod, Harold encouraged her. Upon opening the envelope, Jasmine found a check with an amount that made her eyes widen in surprise. It was more money than she had ever seen in her entire life. Along with the check was a handwritten letter from Harold. In the letter, Harold explained that he had made the decision to leave Jasmine a significant portion of his inheritance. He wrote about how he had observed over the years how hard she worked, always with a smile on her face, even on the hardest days. He mentioned that he knew about her dreams of attending college and opening her own business someday, and that he wanted to give her the means to make those dreams come true. Jasmine, with tears in her eyes, could hardly believe what she was reading. She looked at Harold, at a loss for words to express her gratitude. He simply smiled and said, "You deserve this, my dear. Use this money to build the life you've always dreamed of. Do something extraordinary." Word of Harold's generous gesture quickly spread throughout the restaurant and local community. Many were moved by the story, seeing it as a powerful example of how small acts of kindness can have a profound and lasting impact. In the days that followed, Jasmine continued to work at the restaurant, treating Harold and all the other customers with the same affection and dedication as always. She knew that the money she had received was an incredible blessing, but she also understood that the true wealth lay in the human connections she had cultivated over the years. Harold continued to visit the restaurant whenever his health permitted. Each visit was a silent celebration of the special friendship they had forged. Jasmine made a point of sitting with him for a few minutes every day, listening to his stories and sharing his plans for the future. As time passed, Jasmine began to carefully plan how she would use the money Harold had given her. She signed up for night classes at a local college, studying business administration with a focus on restaurant management. Her co-workers and regular customers at Au Sabre du Lar supported her unconditionally, covering her shifts when she needed to study for exams and offering words of encouragement in difficult times. While Jasmine pursued her academic dreams, she didn't forget her roots. She continued working at the restaurant now, not just as a waitress, but also helping with management. The owner of the establishment, recognizing his potential and dedication, began to entrust him with more responsibilities. As her management knowledge grew, Jasmine began to implement small changes in the restaurant, always with the owner's approval. She introduced a new kitchen organization system that increased efficiency, created a loyalty program for regular customers, and even hosted theme nights that attracted new regulars. Harold watched Jasmine's growth with pride. Although his health continued to decline, he made a point of visiting the restaurant as often as possible, often just to see Jasmine's beaming smile as she ran back and forth, balancing her responsibilities with grace and determination. One day, during one of his visits, Harold called Jasmine close and said in a low voice, "You know, my dear, when I decided to leave that money to you, I knew I was doing the right thing. But seeing you blossom like this, using this opportunity to grow and help others, this exceeds all my expectations. You are not only making your dreams come true, you are inspiring everyone around you." These words deeply touched Jasmine's heart. She realized that Harold's gift was not just the money itself, but the trust he had placed in her, the belief in her potential. This motivated her even more to make a difference, not just in her own life, but in the lives of everyone around her. Over time, Jasmine began thinking about ways to give back to the community that had supported her for so long. She used some of the money to create a small scholarship fund for neighborhood youth who dreamed of attending college but didn't have the financial means to do so. She named the fund in Harold's honor, calling it the Harold McAllister Education Fund. The impact of this fund was immediate and profound. Young people who previously did not see the possibility of continuing their studies now had a real chance to pursue their dreams. Jasmine made a point of getting to know each fund beneficiary personally, sharing with them the story of her friendship with Harold, and encouraging them to pass on the kindness they had received. Meanwhile, at the restaurant, Jasmine continued to impress everyone with her dedication and innovation. She proposed to the owner the idea of expanding the business by opening a small attached coffee shop that would serve gourmet coffee and fresh-baked goods. With her business education almost complete, Jasmine presented a detailed business plan that the owner couldn't refuse. The opening of the coffee shop was a resounding success. Jasmine had transformed a previously underutilized space into a cozy, modern spot that appealed to both the restaurant's regulars and a new, younger clientele. She made a point of hiring young people from the local community, offering them not only a job, but also mentoring and the opportunity to learn about business management. Harold, now 92, watched the cafe's opening from his wheelchair with tears of pride in his eyes. He saw how the small act of kindness he had planted years ago had blossomed into something much bigger than he could have ever imagined. As the success of the restaurant and coffee shop grew, Jasmine never forgot her roots. She continued to personally serve regular customers, especially Harold, whenever he visited. For her, this gesture was a way of staying connected with what really mattered, the people and relationships she had built over the years. One day, while serving Harold breakfast, Jasmine noticed that he looked particularly tired. Concerned, she sat down with him and asked how he was feeling. Harold held her hand and with a faint smile said, "My dear Jasmine, I think my journey is coming to an end. But I want you to know that seeing you blossom in this way has been the greatest joy of my last years. Don't you?" It only fulfilled his dreams, but it also gave me purpose in my final days. Jasmine, with tears in her eyes, promised Harold that she would continue to honor his legacy, not just through the education fund, but in every act of kindness she could perform. In the days that followed, she made a point of visiting Harold at his home, bringing him his favorite meals from the restaurant, and spending hours talking to him, reminiscing about the good times they had shared. 2 weeks later, Harold passed away peacefully in his sleep. The news of his death shook the entire community, especially those who frequented the restaurant, but to connect, share stories, and support each other. Jasmine, now 35, looked back with gratitude at the incredible journey she had been on. What started as a simple waitressing job had turned into a life mission. She was not only a successful businesswoman, but a respected community leader known for her compassion, generosity, and ability to inspire others. One quiet morning, as Jasmine prepared the restaurant to open, she paused for a moment in front of Harold's photo that had been placed in a prominent place on the wall. She smiled, remembering all the mornings she had spent serving him, listening to his stories and learning from his wisdom. At that moment, Jasmine felt a deep gratitude for everything that had happened. She knew that the success she had achieved was not hers alone, but the result of a chain of kindness that began with a simple act of generosity. Determined to keep Harold's spirit alive, she decided to implement new initiatives at the restaurant and cafe. One of these initiatives was Caffè Pendente, inspired by an Italian tradition. Customers could pay for an extra coffee that would be pending for someone who couldn't pay. This idea quickly caught on, and soon expanded to include full meals. Jasmine saw this as a way to spread the kindness Harold had shown, allowing more people to experience the generosity of strangers. Another initiative was the creation of a community space upstairs of the restaurant. Jasmine transformed an old warehouse into a welcoming room where local groups could meet for free. Soon, the space was being used for literacy classes, support groups, crafts workshops, and more. This further strengthened community bonds and solidified the restaurant's role as a central place for gathering and mutual support. As these initiatives grew, Jasmine and the restaurant's reputation spread beyond the boundaries of the neighborhood. Local journalists began writing about the positive impact the facility was having on the community. One day, a reporter from a national television network got in touch, interested in doing a story about Jasmine and Harold's story. Initially, Jasmine hesitated. She never sought public recognition and worried that media attention would somehow diminish the authenticity of what they were doing. However, after talking to her team and thinking about it, she realized that sharing her story could inspire others to perform similar acts of kindness in their own communities. The report aired on a Sunday night, and the impact was immediate. Jasmine and Harold's story of how a simple act of kindness turned into a community movement touched the hearts of millions of viewers across the country. In the days that followed, the restaurant was inundated with phone calls, emails, and visits from people wanting to express their support and gratitude. Many visitors traveled from far and wide just to have a coffee at the cafe and experience for themselves the special atmosphere that Jasmine had created. Some local business owners, inspired by the story, reached out to Jasmine to learn how they could implement similar programs in their own businesses. Sudden success brought new challenges. Jasmine found herself having to balance increased demand with the desire to maintain the quality and welcoming atmosphere that had always characterized the restaurant. She turned down offers to franchise the business, feeling that would dilute the essence of what made the place special. Instead, Jasmine focused on improving what they already had. She expanded the kitchen, hired more local employees, and increased the capacity of the mentoring program. It also created a training program for other small business owners, teaching them how to implement ethical business practices and social impact programs. One day, while Jasmine was busy in the kitchen, a young woman entered the restaurant. She seemed nervous and a little lost. Jasmine, noticing the girl's hesitation, approached to see if she could help. "You showed me that it's possible to make a difference in people's lives, no matter where you come from. You changed my life." These words hit Jasmine deeply. She realized that Harold's legacy lived on, not just through her, but now through Lily and everyone else whose lives had been touched by the restaurant and its programs. Inspired by this moment, Jasmine decided to further formalize the educational aspect of her business. She worked with local educators to develop a comprehensive restaurant management and social entrepreneurship curriculum. The restaurant's upper floor, which was previously used for community meetings, was transformed into a daytime learning space. This training program quickly gained recognition. Students from across the country began signing up, eager to learn not only the practical skills of restaurant management, but also how to create businesses that have a positive social impact. As the program grew, Jasmine realized she needed more space. She purchased an abandoned building across the street and turned it into a full-fledged training center. The new space included a fully equipped training kitchen, classrooms, and even a small restaurant school where students could practice their skills in a real-world environment. The training center was named Harold McAllister Institute for Gastronomy and Social Impact, in honor of the man who had started this entire journey. At the opening ceremony, Jasmine gave an emotional speech, recalling her journey from waitress to businesswoman and educator. "Every cup of coffee we serve, every meal we prepare, every student we coach, is a tribute to Harold and all those who believe in the power of small acts of kindness," she said. "This institute isn't just about teaching people how to run restaurants. It's about teaching them how to create spaces where community can come together, where strangers can become friends, and where compassion and generosity are as important as profit." The impact of the institute was immediate and profound. Graduates of the program began opening their own restaurants and cafes across the country, each incorporating the social impact principles they had learned. An informal network of establishments committed to social change began to form, all tracing their roots back to the small restaurant where it all began. As Jasmine's empire grew, she never lost sight of her roots. She still spent most of her time at the original restaurant, serving customers, mentoring employees, and ensuring that the community spirit that had defined the place from the beginning remained intact. One day, while Jasmine was serving breakfast, she noticed an elderly woman sitting alone at a table in the corner. The woman seemed a little lost and confused. Remembering how she took care of Harold, Jasmine approached to see if the lady needed help. The woman introduced herself as Eleanor and explained that she had recently moved to the neighborhood after her husband's death. She was feeling lonely and disoriented in her new surroundings. Jasmine spent some time talking to Eleanor, making her feel welcome and comfortable. In the days following her 20th birthday celebration, Jasmine felt renewed energy and purpose. The success of the event and the launch of Prohibition had generated a wave of enthusiasm and interest, not only in the local community, but throughout the country. Registrations for the Centella project began to arrive in the thousands. Stories of ordinary people with extraordinary ideas to improve their communities flooded Jasmine's inbox. There were proposals for community gardens in underserved neighborhoods, mentoring programs for at-risk youth, creative recycling initiatives, and more. Jasmine realized that evaluating all of these proposals would be a monumental task. She decided to form an advisory committee made up of Harold McAllister Institute alumni, community leaders, and social impact experts. This group would meet regularly to review the proposals and select the most promising projects to receive the microgrants. As Project Spark gained momentum, Jasmine continued to oversee the day-to-day operations of the restaurant and institute. She made a point of staying connected to the grassroots work, often surprising customers by showing up in person to serve breakfast or help in the kitchen during the lunch rush. One day, while Jasmine was working at the register, a young man entered the restaurant. He looked nervous and a little out of place. Jasmine greeted him with a warm smile and asked if he would like a coffee. The young man, who introduced himself as Marcus, explained that he was actually looking for a job. Jasmine invited Marcus to sit down and talk. During their conversation, she discovered that Marcus was an ex-convict who was struggling to find work due to his history. He had heard about the restaurant and its reputation for giving people second chances. Touched by Marcus's story and impressed by his sincerity, Jasmine decided to offer him a trial period in the kitchen. She knew that giving someone like Marcus an opportunity was exactly the kind of thing Harold would have done. Over the next few weeks, Marcus proved himself to be a dedicated and hard-working employee. Her presence on the team also opened Jasmine's eyes to a new challenge. How could the restaurant do more to support the reintegration of ex-offenders into society? Inspired by this experience, Jasmine developed a new program called New Page. The program offered culinary and hospitality skills training to ex-offenders, combined with mentoring support and job search assistance. The restaurant committed to hiring a certain number of graduates from the program each year, and Jasmine used her industry connections to ensure that other restaurants in the city offered opportunities as well. The Nova Pagina program quickly gained recognition as an innovative model of social reintegration. Criminal justice officials began reaching out to Jasmine to learn more about the program and explore ways to replicate it in other cities. Meanwhile, Project Spark was beginning to bear fruit. Jasmine received news from across the country about the positive impacts the funded projects were having on their communities. In a small Midwestern town, a microgrant had allowed a group of teenagers to create a meal delivery program for isolated seniors. In an urban East Coast neighborhood, another grant had funded the transformation of an empty lot into a vibrant community garden. Inspired by these stories, Jasmine decided it was time to take the restaurant model beyond the borders of the United States. She began exploring partnerships with international development organizations to adapt the community restaurant concept to different cultural and economic contexts. The first international project was launched in a slum in Mumbai, India. Working closely with local community leaders, Jasmine and her team helped establish a restaurant that not only served affordable, nutritious meals, but also offered culinary and business skills training to women in the community. The project in Mumbai faced several initial challenges, from logistical issues to cultural barriers. But Jasmine approached each obstacle with the same determination and creativity she had demonstrated throughout her career. She spent weeks in India, working side by side with the local team, learning about Indian cuisine, and adapting the restaurant model to meet the community's specific needs. The success of the project in Mumbai opened doors for similar initiatives in other parts of the world. Soon, Jasmine was traveling to places as diverse as a rural village in Kenya, a refugee community in Greece, and a declining mining town in Chile, always looking for ways to adapt and apply the principles she had learned from Harold. These international experiences have brought new perspectives and ideas to Jasmine's work in the United States. She began incorporating elements of global cuisine into the original restaurant's menu, creating cultural fusion nights that celebrated the diversity of the local community and introduced diners to new flavors and traditions. As Jasmine's empire continued to grow, she faced a new challenge: how to maintain the authenticity and community spirit that had been the hallmarks of the original restaurant in a now global operation. To address this issue, Jasmine implemented a system of community ambassadors at each new location. These ambassadors were respected members of the local community who served as liaisons between the restaurant and the neighborhood, ensuring that each establishment remained truly rooted in its community. Jasmine also made a point of personally visiting each new location at least once a year. During these visits, she not only supervised operations, but also spent time working in the kitchen, serving customers and talking to employees and community members. These direct interactions helped keep Jasmine connected to the groundwork and ensured she never lost sight of the restaurant's original mission. One day, during one of these visits to a new restaurant in a small town in the southern United States, Jasmine had an unexpected encounter. She was cleaning a table when she noticed an elderly man watching her closely. When she approached to ask if he needed anything, the man smiled and said, "You must be Jasmine. Harold talked a lot about you." Surprised, Jasmine sat down with the man, who introduced himself as Frank, an old wartime friend of Harold's. Frank told Jasmine stories about Harold that she had never heard before, stories of courage, compassion, and sacrifice during the difficult war years. Harold always said that the true measure of a person is not what he does in times of peace and comfort, but how he acts when everything is against him, Frank said. And look at you now, living that principle every day. These words touched Jasmine deeply. They reminded her that no matter how big the business became, Harold's true legacy was in the countless lives touched by acts of kindness and generosity. Inspired by this encounter, Jasmine decided to launch a new initiative called Stories of Kindness. This project invited people from around the world to share their experiences of unexpected acts of kindness that had impacted their lives. The stories would be compiled into a book, with profits going to the Harold McAllister Education Fund. The Stories of Kindness project quickly gained momentum. Thousands of stories began to arrive from all corners of the globe, stories of strangers helping strangers, of small gestures that made big differences, of moments of human connection amid difficult circumstances. Jasmine spent hours reading these stories, often with tears in her eyes. Each narrative reaffirmed his belief in the transformative power of kindness and reignited his passion for the work he was doing. As the restaurant's 30th anniversary approached, Jasmine began to reflect on the future. She knew she couldn't lead the organization forever and began thinking seriously about succession and long-term sustainability. She brought together a team of trusted leaders from various parts of the organization, from the original restaurant, the Institute, the International Program, and Project Spark. Together, they began to develop a plan to ensure that Harold's legacy and the restaurant's mission continued long after Jasmine retired. Part of that plan included creating an advisory board made up of community leaders, social impact experts, and Institute alumni. This advice would help guide the strategic direction of the organization and ensure it remains true to its original mission. Jasmine also began working on her memoir, not out of vanity, but as a way to preserve the history and principles that had guided the organization from the beginning. She wanted future generations of leaders and employees to understand the restaurant's humble roots and the values that had transformed it into a global movement. While working on the book, Jasmine reflected on the incredible journey she had been on. From a simple waitress to the leader of an international social impact organization, she had seen firsthand how a simple act of kindness could spark a chain reaction of positive change. But even with all her growth and success, Jasmine never forgot the lessons Harold taught her so many years ago. She still woke up early every morning to open the original restaurant, greeting customers by name and serving coffee with a warm smile. Because in the end, she knew that the true heart of her mission was not in the grand programs or international recognition, but in the small moments of human connection that occurred every day over a hot cup of coffee. As the restaurant's 30th anniversary approached, Jasmine decided it was time for a truly global celebration. She organized a simultaneous event at all associated restaurants and community centers around the world. The idea was to create a wave of kindness that would encircle the globe in a 24-hour period. The event began at the original restaurant in Chicago, with Jasmine serving the first breakfast at exactly 7:30 a.m., the time Harold usually arrived every day. As the sun moved across the globe, each location held its own celebration, broadcasting live so everyone could participate virtually. In Mumbai, the local team organized a huge community feast, serving traditional Indian dishes alongside classic recipes from the original menu. In Kenya, the community center held a crafts fair, highlighting local talent that had been nurtured through the training programs. In Greece, the restaurant in the refugee community hosted a music and dance festival, celebrating the diverse cultures represented there. As the event unfolded, Jasmine watched in amazement as broadcasts from around the world. She saw smiles on the faces of people from different countries, cultures, and backgrounds, all united by the spirit of community and kindness that Harold had inspired so many years ago. At the culmination of the event, Jasmine gave a speech broadcast to all locations. She spoke about the incredible journey they had been on, from a small act of kindness to a global movement. But more importantly, she emphasized that the true success was not in the numbers or the scale of the operation, but in the countless moments of human connection that occurred every day at each location. Every cup of coffee served with a smile, every kind word exchanged between strangers, every hand extended in help. "It's these moments that truly matter," said Jasmine. "It's these moments that change lives and build stronger, more compassionate communities." At the end of her speech, Jasmine announced the launch of a new initiative called Seeds of Kindness. This program would provide small grants to children and youth who want to start impactful projects in their communities. The idea was to nurture the spirit of service and social entrepreneurship from an early age, planting the seeds for the next generation of community leaders. In the days following the global celebration, Jasmine received a flood of messages of gratitude and inspiring stories from around the world. She spent hours reading each one, often with tears in her eyes, marveling at the impact a simple act of kindness could have. One story in particular caught Jasmine's attention. It was from a young woman called Amina, from the community center in Kenya. Amina wrote about how the culinary training program had not only given her practical skills, but also the confidence to dream big. Inspired by Jasmine's example, Amina had started her own small catering business, focused on providing nutritious meals to local schools. Jasmine was so touched by Amina's story that she decided to visit her in person. She flew to Kenya and spent a week working alongside Amina in her kitchen, helping her refine her recipes and develop a sustainable business plan. During this visit, Jasmine had an epiphany. She realized that the true future of the organization was not in continuing to expand indefinitely, but in nurturing local leaders like Amina who could adapt the model to the specific needs of their communities. With this new vision in mind, Jasmine began restructuring the organization. Instead of looking to open more and more locations, it focused on strengthening existing centers and turning them into training and incubation hubs for local social entrepreneurs. McAllister Institute has expanded to include a global community leaders program. This intensive year-long program brought promising people from different parts of the world to Chicago, where they received comprehensive training in restaurant management, social entrepreneurship, and community leadership. Jasmine also implemented a reverse mentoring system where these emerging leaders could share their unique perspectives and cultural knowledge with the organization's senior team. This helped keep the organization agile and culturally sensitive, always adapting its approaches to local realities. As this new strategy unfolded, Jasmine began to see surprising results. Small community cafes and restaurants inspired by the original model began to emerge organically in cities and towns around the world, each adapted to local needs and flavors, but all united by the same spirit of kindness and community service. As she watched this organic growth, Jasmine remembered something Harold used to say: "True kindness is like a seed. Plant it in the right place, nurture it carefully, and it will grow on its own, spreading more seeds along the way." Out of the way. With her 60th birthday approaching, Jasmine began to think seriously about the organization's long-term future. She knew she couldn't lead forever and wanted to ensure Harold's legacy continued long after she retired. After much thought and discussion with her trusted team, Jasmine decided to transform the organization into a non-profit foundation. This structure would allow the restaurant's original mission to continue, while also providing a solid foundation for the many programs and initiatives that had grown over the years. The new Harold McAllister Foundation for Community Change would be led by a diverse board of directors, including Institute alumni, community leaders from different parts of the world, and social impact experts. Jasmine would remain involved as President Emeritus, offering guidance and keeping the original spirit of the mission alive. As part of this transition, Jasmine decided it was time to share the full story of Harold and the restaurant with the world. She worked with a writer to create a book that told not only her own journey, but also the countless stories of lives changed along the way. The book, titled A Cup of Kindness: How a Simple Act of Generosity Changed the World, was released on Jasmine's 60th birthday. The launch ceremony was held at the original restaurant, with live broadcast to all associated locations around the world. When Jasmine took the small makeshift stage to speak, she looked around the crowded restaurant. He saw familiar faces of longtime customers, some of whom had been coming there for decades. He saw members of his team, from new employees to managers who had grown with the business. And through the video screens, he saw the faces of people from all over the world whose lives had been touched by the mission that began in that very place so many years ago. With tears in her eyes, Jasmine began her speech. 40 years ago, I was just a young waitress trying to make ends meet. I had no big dreams or ambitions other than paying my bills at the end of the month. But then, a man named Harold McAllister walked into this restaurant and changed everything with a simple act of kindness. What Harold gave me that day wasn't just money. He gave me something much more valuable. He showed me the transformative power of generosity and compassion. He taught me that each of us has the power to make a difference in someone else's life, even through the simplest gestures. Looking back now, I realize that the real miracle wasn't the growth of this organization or the number of lives we touched. The true miracle is how a single act of kindness can create ripples that spread far beyond what we can see or imagine. Each of you here today, whether you are a customer, an employee, a partner, or someone watching from afar, is part of this wave. Every cup of coffee you served with a smile, every kind word you exchanged with a stranger, every hand you extended to help someone in need, all of these small actions added up to create something truly extraordinary. As we look to the future, my greatest hope is that we continue to spread this wave of kindness. May we never forget the power that each of us has to make a difference. And may we always remember Harold's words: the true measure of a person is not what he has, but what he is willing to give. As Jasmine concluded her speech, the restaurant erupted in applause. People hugged each other, many with tears in their eyes, all united by the feeling that they were part of something bigger than themselves. That night, long after the last customer had left and the lights had been turned off, Jasmine was left alone in the restaurant. She slowly walked through the space, her fingers lightly brushing the polished tables, remembering all the special moments that had occurred there over the years. Finally, she stopped in front of the framed photo of Harold that occupied a place of honor on the wall. Looking at the smiling face of the man who had changed her life, Jasmine felt a rush of gratitude and renewed purpose. "Thank you, Harold," she whispered. "I promise we will continue his legacy, one cup of coffee at a time." And with that, Jasmine turned off the lights and closed the door, ready for the next chapter in the extraordinary journey that had begun with a simple act of kindness.